Diddy's trial just detonated Hollywood's hush-hush club. Prosecutors played a sealed tape that allegedly catches Diddy, Will Smith, and Meek Mill in the same jaw-dropping freak-off. That single clip has Will retreating into silence, Meek firing off frantic tweets, and the entire courtroom scrambling to keep the evidence under wraps. Stick around, because in the next few minutes, you'll hear how this audio bomb could torch 3 empires and blow the lid off every rumor you thought was too wild to be true. From the moment the first muffled moan echoed through the speakers, you could almost feel reputations evaporate in real time as reporters froze and attorneys whispered. Since then, subpoenas have piled up, ex-Bad Boy insiders are lining up to talk, and legal scholars warn the judge's secrecy orders could spark a constitutional firefight over public access. We're unpacking why the prosecution dropped the tape now, what it really contains, and how one explosive recording might drag 3 music titans and anyone who partied in their orbit into a scandal that could redefine celebrity privilege forever. The pivot hit like a thunderclap the instant prosecutors wheeled a slim, unmarked hard drive into evidence and asked the judge for a closed court playback. For 3 straight weeks, the case had circled Cassie Ventura's testimony, tracking timelines, NDA paper trails, and luxury suite nightmares, until this single device shifted every gaze to the defense table. The chain of custody, we learned, traced back to an internal affairs sting on a former Bad Boy security captain who'd quietly flipped, turning over files labeled only by timestamps and hotel room numbers. Inside that trove sat 2 compressed MP3s, plus a metadata log showing they'd been copied only once onto a studio laptop registered to Combs Enterprises. What nobody expected was whose voices the FBI's forensic lab claimed to isolate. 3 distinct vocal signatures matching Diddy, Will Smith, and Meek Mill, trading playful taunts between ragged breaths. A linguistic analyst testified in chambers that the waveform peaks of a laughing "Yeah, Daddy" aligned with Meek's vocal fingerprint at a 98% confidence interval. Another expert pointed to Will's mid-sentence chuckle, the same one sound editors have scrubbed from blooper reels for decades. Defense lawyers demanded suppression, arguing the voices could be deep-faked, yet the prosecution countered with a chain of digital signatures, hotel Wi-Fi pings, and time-stamped access logs that placed all 3 men in the same penthouse within. A 5-minute window. By the time the court's speakers crackled to life, even seasoned bailiffs clenched their jawlines. Suddenly, the government wasn't merely corroborating Cassie's trauma, it was alleging a clandestine fraternity where megastars blurred every personal boundary behind hotel keycards. That seismic reveal triggered fallout beyond any scripted courtroom drama. Publicists for Will and Meek scrambled into triage mode, issuing midnight emails to entertainment editors begging for context, while privately canvassing audio authenticity experts willing to challenge the FBI's methodology. Social media feeds erupted in real time. Will's carefully curated comeback narrative evaporated as TikTok detectives spliced the alleged moan into red carpet videos, while Meek's frantic tweet storms, vowing 6-figure rewards for proof of a deep fake, only intensified scrutiny. Behind court doors, the judge weighed dueling motions, the defense pleading for mistrial over irreversible jury bias, the prosecution insisting the tape was just the first of several recordings poised to unravel a pattern of covert gatherings, and power-leveraged intimacy. Even record labels felt tremors, convening emergency risk assessment calls to gauge collateral damage if streaming giants yanked catalogs pending criminal fallout. In a single afternoon, the trial's focus shifted from a survivor story to an alleged secret alliance of chart toppers, turning every prior denial into potential perjury, and every future court day into must-watch spectacle for an audience that suddenly realized the scandal was far deeper and far more interconnected than anyone dared whisper aloud. Rumor mills had long toyed with whispers of Will Smith floating through Diddy's late-night orbit, but the tape's debut transformed idle speculation into a forensic puzzle, and Will's inner circle knew they had minutes, not days, to regain narrative control. Within hours, crisis PR consultants drafted a tiered containment plan. First, scrub search results by flooding entertainment sites with feel-good Fresh Prince retrospectives. Second, commission a white-glove audio firm to cast doubt on Voice ID algorithms. Third, gauge allies inside major outlets who might slow-roll the story until sentiment cooled. Yet nothing blunts digital curiosity once blood is in the water. A senior Spotify security engineer leaked that hotel keycard logs placed a guest using Smith's longtime business alias on the penthouse floor at the exact timestamp shown in the tape's metadata. Meanwhile, a Los Angeles cybersecurity firm traced a VPN ping originating from an iPad tied to Will's production company, connecting to the suite's Wi-Fi network just 9 minutes before the recording begins. Those data crumbs turned social media sleuths into full-blown archivists overnight. TikTok timelines morphed into red-string crime boards linking Will's unannounced European press jaunt in 2019 to a secret Diddy yacht party off Capri. And every grainy photo of them laughing side by side at industry galas suddenly looked charged with subtext. Privately, Will's legal advisors floated an audacious counter-strategy. Concede he attended an after-hours listening session that night, but deny any sexual context, framing the recording as a doctored splice from multiple sources. Yet, that defense risked implosion if prosecutors revealed surveillance stills they hinted at possessing, frames allegedly showing Will's custom bomber jacket hanging on a chair inside the suite, instantly verifiable by its one-of-a-kind embroidery, gifted by a Japanese designer. Adding fuel, an ex-security contractor for Diddy quietly signaled willingness to testify that Will had visited at least 4 private showcases, where phones were bagged and biometric scanners logged each guest. The contractor's NDA would be worthless if subpoenaed, leaving Will's camp to weigh the greater evil, fight admissibility and appear evasive, or negotiate limited immunity in exchange for clarifying the tape's context, an option that could salvage legal footing yet torch public perception. As the debate raged behind mansion gates, one fact became undeniable to everyone watching the live-stream docket updates. Will Smith's carefully curated reinvention tour, post-slap apologies, red table reconciliations, award season grin, now. Hung by a thread woven from kilohertz, metadata hashes, and the faintest, unmistakable ring of his own laughter. The moment Meek Mill's voice was pinpointed on the recording, the rapper's instinctive response wasn't legal restraint, but digital warfare. He transformed his X timeline into a rolling barrage of defiance, posting half a dozen times in under an hour, daring any clout-hungry blogger to prove the tape authentic. Yet behind the chest-thumping bravado, a quieter drama unfolded. Forensic techs handed prosecutors an access point audit from the hotel's private Wi-Fi, flagging a MAC address registered to Meek's personal iPhone that pinged the penthouse router within 90 seconds of the time-stamped audio. That dataset, married to Bluetooth beacon logs showing his watch unlocking the suite door twice in the same evening, landed on the judge's desk, instantly backing the FBI linguists' 98% voice match claim. Meek's attorneys scrambled for an alternative narrative, alleging the phone could have been piggybacked by an unknown party, but cyber experts swatted the theory aside. The security certificate on his device renewed automatically at 2:14 a.m., a process requiring the handset to be within 2 meters of the router. As screenshots of these technical affidavits leaked to journalists, Meek's public denial tour began to clash spectacularly with the data trail, and every furious tweet he fired felt less like bravado and more like a reflexive attempt to outrun an algorithm that already had him cornered. Privately, damage control consultants urged a pivot, suggest he'd stepped into the suite after the fact to confront Diddy over Cassie's rumored exploitation, cast himself as an unwitting witness rather than a participant. But that storyline collapsed when metadata revealed the audio's final seconds captured Meek's signature laugh directly beneath Diddy's breathy congratulations. With legal options narrowing, Meek's team floated a scorched earth defense, claimed deep fake technology, attack federal voice ID standards, and threaten countersuits against any outlet replaying the clip. The risk? Going to war with the very court deciding his potential indictment for perjury if he denied presence under oath. Meanwhile, music industry insiders whispered that Meek's long-standing mentorship under Diddy included mentee retreats at off-grid estates, events once dismissed as networking weekends, now recast as possible staging grounds for off-the-books freak-off recordings. Streaming platform executives convened late-night calls about whether to sandbox Meek's catalog in the same compliance queue reserved for artists facing active felony probes. In less than 48 hours, a social media firestorm had metastasized into a legal quagmire. Every new cyber forensic breadcrumb yanked Meek's protestations further from credibility, while his public meltdown played out in real time before millions cemented the impression of a man flailing against hard evidence he never imagined would surface. When Cassie Ventura retook the stand after the tape's bombshell premiere, she didn't bother revisiting the emotional terrain of her earlier trauma. Instead, she zoomed in on logistics, transforming memories once dismissed as lurid anecdotes. into a chilling timeline that dovetailed almost perfectly with the hard drive's metadata. She recalled a Paris stopover on Diddy's 2019 European run, where studio-grade mics appeared in the penthouse for a private session, and she ticked off room numbers that matched the very hex-encoded labels investigators found on the MP3 file names. Cassie described a strict 3-device rule enforced by bodyguards, 2 phones surrendered at the door, 1 burner returned for music requests, a protocol neatly echoed by Wi-Fi logs showing a trio of MAC addresses reconnecting to the suite every few hours. Without a trace of theatrical indignation, she testified that Diddy would sometimes brag about legendary cameos on his tapes and drop coded hints, referencing a fresh guest, the prosecution implying Will, Smith, and a dream chaser, obvious shorthand for Meek. Each detail, delivered in an even, almost clinical tone, functioned like connective tissue, fusing her past allegations to the present forensic trail. The burner phone explains why the audio contained fresh Bluetooth handshake signals. The cameo boasts explain why investigators found isolated voice tracks labeled with celebrity initials in a hidden folder. And her reference to audio insurance gives the DA a plausible motive for Diddy to hoard compromising clips. By the time Cassie stepped down, jurors no longer faced a single scandalous recording. They faced a latticework of corroborations, each thread traced back to the same habit of capturing freak-offs as currency. Dawn Richards' sworn account drove the pattern home from a different angle, the operational side. She laid out a roster system among bad boy entourage members. Runner A arranged the limo routes, Runner B handled NDAs. Runner C performed nightly trash sweeps to ensure no lingering SIM cards or stray USBs escaped the suite. Those trash sweeps, she alleged, were ordered specifically because Diddy believed the audio is the gold, protect the gold. Prosecutors then pulled up hotel CCTV stills, showing Runner C dropping a plastic bag into a shredded console mirror, hours after the contested tape's timestamp, a sequence that fortifies the theory of a systematic cleanup. Dawn also recounted overhearing Diddy boast that if any guest star ever talked, he had footage and vocals ready to set the internet on fire, a threat that now reads less like hyperbole and more like a contingency plan exposed by this very trial. Crucially, Dawn's expense report archives, obtained via subpoena from Bad Boy's Dormant Tour LLC, list recurring purchases for portable vocal booths and sound-dampening drapes month after month, matching the cities Cassie named in her itinerary. The cumulative weight of these logistics doesn't just validate the existence of the tape, it suggests an entire infrastructure built to manufacture, protect, and, if necessary, weaponize similar recordings. In courtroom shorthand, Dawn and Cassie collectively supplied the missing instruction manual, the who does what, the when and where, and the why that stitches Diddy, Will, and Meek into a single, meticulously documented event that prosecutors now frame as part of a repeating, profit-backed enterprise rather than a one-off act of hedonism gone viral. Subpoenas began landing like overdue royalty checks, each stamped with a name fans hadn't heard in years. An engineer who mixed No Way Out, a stage manager from the 2004 Vote or Die tour, even the soft-spoken vocal coach credited. On Meek Mill's debut demo, most thought their NDAs would shield them forever, until federal marshals arrived with immunity offers and a glimpse of the metadata lattice Cassie and Dawn had already woven. What convinced them to talk wasn't just the promise of legal cover. It was the unmistakable sound print of their own ad-libs echoing faintly in the raw tape's background, sliced and stashed in the same hidden folder as the Fresh and Dream Chaser vocal tracks. In sworn proffers, they described a velvet rope ecosystem where recordings were currency, a trump card library Diddy jokingly called his war chest. One road crew accountant produced ledgers showing hush money payments disguised as consulting fees, timed precisely 24 hours after private listening sessions that coincided with Will's alias-booked stays and Meek's backstage passes. Another insider recalled a black fireproof briefcase labeled only gems ferried city to city by Runner C, always kept within arm's reach of Diddy's personal bodyguard. Cross-referenced with hotel footage and card key audits, that briefcase now reads like physical proof of an off-books archive. An archive the prosecution hints could implicate additional A-listers, whose initials appear as cryptic file tags awaiting decryption. The labels felt the tremor first. Within hours of the witness list leaking, a half-dozen catalog licensing execs convened an emergency Zoom with crisis attorneys. If even one insider authenticated a broader vault of compromised streaming, algorithms might flag entire discographies for sensitive content, slicing revenue overnight. PR teams combed social feeds, pre-drafting statements that distanced their artists from any unsanctioned private recordings, while hedge fund analysts quietly revised valuations of music rights portfolios backed by bad boy masters. Meanwhile, defense counsel tried a preemptive strike, floating sworn declarations that no authenticated evidence tied Will or Meek to additional sessions. But prosecutors counter-filed a motion hinting at unopened drives still undergoing hash verification. Behind courtroom doors, marshals escorted the first insider witness to a safe-house hotel, a rare step reserved for cases where testimony could crater million-dollar reputations overnight. And as the gallery buzzed with rumors of a still-sealed Capri Yacht folder, allegedly featuring another A-list cameo, one truth became stark. The audio played last week might be only a trailer. If the insiders corroborate a systematic practice of taping and stockpiling celebrity encounters, Diddy's trial could balloon into an enterprise fraud saga that entangles Will, Meek, and any star who ever trusted a velvet wristband more than their own instinct for self-preservation. No sooner had the first tape rattled through the courthouse speakers than a coalition of media powerhouses, the New York Times, CNN, Rolling Stone, and even TMZ, filed an emergency joint motion demanding full access to both the audio and its verbatim transcript, arguing that America cannot stomach justice conducted behind velvet curtains. The judge, well aware that replaying graphic content in open session could instantly ping across every phone in the gallery, countered with a provisional gag order so sweeping that court reporters now receive only sanitized summaries with the salacious verbs replaced by clinical blanks. Civil liberties lawyers howled that the move undercuts the very transparency doctrine that kept the O.J. Simpson trial in daylight, while victim advocacy groups insisted the explicit male-on-male track risks reducing survivors' trauma to viral fodder. Into that constitutional tug-of-war stepped the Electronic Frontier Foundation, filing an amicus brief that cites 2024's Supreme Court decision in Jenkins v. Florida, a ruling that bars blanket suppression when evidence has clear countervailing public interest value. Defense attorneys pounced on the nuance. They argued that any public dissemination now would irreparably scorch Will's and Meek's civil reputations if the jury ultimately acquits, and they trotted out an expert on deepfake detection, who testified that audio authenticity in 2025 is never absolute, quietly seeding doubt they hope will flower at closing argument. The impasse became so tense that the judge floated an unprecedented compromise, a controlled listening booth where credentialed journalists would sign waivers, hear the tapes through noise-isolating headphones, and walk away with memories but no digital copy. A proposal that drew immediate fire for turning evidence into an elite privilege. Outside the marble columns, grassroots open the tapes protests sprouted from Los Angeles to Atlanta, complete with QR codes linking to a crowdsourced petition that surged past 1.2 million signatures in 48 hours. Hacktivist collectives sniffed opportunity, declaring a 48-hour hunt for any unencrypted courthouse backup. Cybersecurity experts warned that even a redacted transcript, if routed through the wrong internal printer, could leak in high-resolution OCR within seconds. Meanwhile, YouTube channels pivoted en masse, dissecting every legal filing line by line, feeding the same algorithm the judge worries will poison jury pools. Scholars warn that if the gag order stands unchallenged, it may create a blueprint for future celebrity defendants to quarantine explosive digital evidence under the banner of privacy, effectively wedging a paywall between citizens and the facts of a public trial. Yet, if the judge caves and opens the floodgates, reputations, rightly or not, could be sentenced in the court of public opinion long before a verdict is read. Caught in that vise are 12 jurors who already know the nation is debating evidence. They alone have heard in full, a defendant whose empire shrinks each time Free the tapes trends, and 2 megastars who could watch their careers implode whether or not the recordings prove criminal intent. In the end, the secrecy fight has mutated from a sidebar motion into the trial's philosophical core, a showdown over who owns the narrative when technology can immortalize every whisper, every breath, and every misjudged moment that once evaporated in the safety of private walls. Within hours of the courthouse shockwave, a worldwide army of digital sleuths weaponized every open-source tool imaginable, turning the trial into a rolling, crowdsourced investigation that no PR team could outrun. Reddit's Tech for Justice spun up a collaborative spreadsheet mapping every publicly known stop on Diddy's 2019 European tour against flight tracking data for Will's charter jet and Meek's label-booked Gulfstream, revealing 3 previously unreported overlaps that align, down to the hour, with hotel Wi-Fi pings subpoenaed by the FBI. TikTok creators fed the spreadsheet into animated heat maps, color-coding intersecting GPS dots that pulsed like warning. Lights across Paris, Capri, and Prague then stitched those clips with slow-zoom paparazzi photos of the trio exiting blacked-out vans. On X, a cyber forensics hobbyist posted a sidechain spectrogram analysis comparing the courtroom "Yeah Daddy" vocal spike to Meek's ad-lib on Dreams and Nightmares, annotating the match with AI-generated overlays so clear that mainstream music journalists began citing fan-made graphics in print. Even Will Smith's on-screen laugh became data. Machine learning enthusiasts scraped every Hollywood blooper reel, feeding 300-plus chuckles into a convolutional neural network that spat out a 0.982 similarity score when cross-checked against the tape's third vocal track, numbers astonishing enough to trend despite lacking any official stamp of authenticity. With each new batch of amateur data points, conspiracy threads grew less speculative and more encyclopedic, creating a feedback loop where audience curiosity generated fresh evidence, which then deepened curiosity, spiraling the conversation beyond anything prosecutors could have anticipated when they hit play in that sealed session. That crowdsourced fervor didn't just map travel itineraries, it excavated an entire ecosystem of long-forgotten digital breadcrumbs that now read like foreshadowing in plain sight. A Berlin nightclub's dormant Instagram account coughed up a 2019 photo of Diddy, Will, and Meek, laughing beside a DJ booth, mundane back then, now viral thanks to facial recognition plugins confirming a timestamp 2 hours before one contested audio clip. A niche archivist site resurfaced a 2014 Danish podcast where a touring audio tech offhandedly joked about packing Puffy's extra mics for the after show. A quip dismissed as industry gossip until Redditors cross-referenced the tech's tour schedule with hotel invoices Dawn Richard listed in her expense report testimony. Meanwhile, deepfake detectives leveraged open-source GAN detectors to argue that the tape could be genuine after all. The telltale phase shuffle artifacts common to synthetic speech were nowhere to be found, strengthening the authenticity narrative that Meek's meltdown had hoped to bury. As these independent analyses ricocheted across every social platform, public belief hardened into quasi-certainty. The tape wasn't an isolated smoking gun, but a single shard of a sprawling digital mosaic, one whose pieces the internet was, assembling faster than law enforcement could redact them. In essence, the court's decision to muzzle the evidence unintentionally deputized a legion of unpaid investigators, transforming spectators into archivists and speculation into an evolving, data-driven dossier that threatens to eclipse whatever official narrative the judge ultimately allows to enter the public record. With the audio authenticated to the court's satisfaction and a lineup of insiders ready to testify that such recordings weren't outliers but inventory, the case now teeters on a precipice far steeper than prison time for any single defendant. It threatens to rewrite how celebrity power is leveraged, insured, and ultimately weaponized. If prosecutors can prove Diddy stockpiled freak-off tapes as collateral, chips to trade for favors, silence, or industry access, then every cameo voice on those drives becomes both victim and potential co-conspirator, entangled in an extortion ecosystem where reputational blackmail replaces traditional non-disclosure agreements. Entertainment lawyers privately admit that a verdict confirming that scheme could detonate contract law. Labels would be forced to add new morality clauses covering clandestine recordings. Insurers might reprice policies for touring artists perceived, as blackmail risks and streaming platforms could be pressed by stakeholders to deplatform catalogs tied to systemic criminal conduct. Meanwhile, Hollywood accountants are already bracing for a second-order shock. If the jury hears a pattern of commercializing illicit footage, civil plaintiffs, from Cassie to any collateral name on those tapes, could sue not just for personal damages, but for disgorgement of decades of profits. A clawback that might strip billions in publishing equity from Bad Boy's once-coveted master recordings. Yet beyond the balance sheets lies a subtler existential reckoning. The idea that private indiscretions, even consensual ones, can no longer be quarantined behind mansion walls in a world where a single encrypted file may outlive every denial. For Will Smith, the calculus now extends past box office forecasts into whether global distributors like Netflix or Sony will gamble nine-figure budgets on a star whose public narrative can be upended by one leaked waveform. For Meek Mill, the risk isn't just canceled festival slots, but every lyrics as testimony bar prosecutors might quote, "if a perjury charge sticks." And overshadowing them all is a judiciary confronted with its own credibility. If evidence exists that the powerful hoarded compromat to tilt careers, can a sealed courtroom model ever again persuade the public that justice isn't being shaped in the shadows? Scholars have begun floating the compromat precedent, a future legal standard that could force courts to weigh the public's right to scrutinize evidence of systemic coercion against the privacy of those ensnared, even unwillingly, on the tapes. In that looming debate, reputations become currency, transparency becomes a weapon, and silence, once the safest bet for the ultra-famous, may prove more explosive than any headline-grabbing confession. The courthouse is officially dark for the weekend, yet the city thrums like a power grid left running after everyone's gone home. Its streets buzzing with theories, its newsrooms stacking drafts for whatever Monday's docket unveils next. Inside that momentary lull, 12 jurors carry a soundtrack the world still hasn't heard. Meek's breathless, "Yeah, Daddy," Will's unmistakable chuckle, Diddy's low-frequency instructions, each syllable looping in their memory like an unskippable playlist. They alone have witnessed how Cassie's meticulous timeline syncs frame perfect with hotel Wi-Fi ghosts, how Don's expense sheets mirror the portable booth receipts, how insiders' ledgers trace hush money from bank branch counters straight to offshore LLCs. And while the judge's gag order tries to cork the pressure, it's already hissing through every social feed, flight manifests, spectrogram overlays, even that black briefcase labeled gems now turned into a viral meme of Pandora's box. For the first time since the trial began, the jurors aren't deciding whether they believe an individual survivor. They're weighing whether an entire entertainment architecture can survive the exposure of its own surveillance economy. If they convict, a precedent forms in real time. Secret recordings used as currency become evidence of trafficking, not trophies of bravado. If they acquit, the tapes still exist, ready to detonate careers one leak at a time, and public faith in courtroom transparency may fracture beyond easy repair. So here's the question only you can answer. When reputations worth billions hinge on a few megabytes locked behind courtroom doors, does the public's right to know trump every plea for privacy? Drop your verdict in the comments, because whether you side with due process caution or radical transparency, your voice helps. Chart the new rules for fame in the digital era. Smash that like button if you want the algorithm to keep this conversation alive, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next sealed evidence showdown, and ring the bell to be first in line when the judge's ruling lands. The tapes may be silent to us for now, but the echoes are already reshaping Hollywood, and the next whisper could rewrite everything you thought you knew about power, consent, and the price of keeping secrets in a world that never forgets. Stay tuned!